Welcome to Tiffany Turned On. I'm your host, Tiffany Anton. I'm a psychotherapist specializing in sex and relationships, hoping to help you discover current topics in a fun, sometimes serious, and educational manner. I hope to help you get turned on to life as well as inside of your bedroom. This is podcast 2 of Slut. I have on here Natasha Wilson, and they are the author of the book Slut, Let Go of Shame Surrounding Sex and Sexuality. Z discusses the importance of self-exploration and discovery and overcoming shame and embracing joy and freedom in one's sexual identity. Z's book guides readers through the process of challenging and transforming harmful beliefs, exploring such topics as mindfulness, changing problematic thinking, the enemies of joy, conflicting identities and beliefs, kink and fetish, queerness, intersectionality of race, sexual orientation, gender, the church's role in shaming sexuality, dismantling rape culture, and ending legacies of sexual shame. Wilson emphasizes the need for self-love and the importance of being mindful of the information we consume and the influence it has on our beliefs. In part 1, we discuss preparing for the work with mindfulness and changing problematic thinking, kind of deciding what are our personal thoughts versus what are those that were placed on us and we just blindly accepted. We discuss those enemies of joy, happiness, and great sex because, of course, we got to make sure that you guys kick them out of the bedroom so you can welcome joy, welcome happiness, and for certain, welcome great sex. I mentioned in the podcast you're getting ready to listen to, I say the word labia majora. What? I screwed that one up. I'm talking about the physical appearance of the labia and the inner lips, which are labia minora. So if you want to hear about vulva and lips, colors, that's included in this part too. I hope that you enjoy. If I can go back to the church chapter, because the relevance of that in my personal practice, that is what I have noticed with clients that present with vaginismus, so assigned female at birth, and has a vaginal canal and is interested in penetration. Those with not only strong religious backgrounds, but that damn purity ceremony, and how once they get married, and all of these years it's not okay to be penetrated, to lose our virginity, that's another topic, is the social construct of virginity, that they come in to see me because of this condition, and it shames them, like, what's wrong with me? And with vaginismus, it is an unconscious process of the vagina becoming so tight that a Q-tip can't enter. I've had clients and their husbands say, it is as if we're hitting a wall. We get this message that we have to guard this virginity, that this is a self-definition of I am a virgin. And how do we turn that off with our body on our marriage day?
That's a very complicated reality because the indoctrination has been so consistent and pervasive that for a lot of people, it's hard to shift from I'm a virtuous person because of my virginity to I'm a sexually active person, and that is also a part of my lived experience. And it's not necessarily something that switches on like a light switch. And it becomes complicated, particularly if the exploration of sexuality is shamed, then you can't share that with your spouse. You can't instruct them on what pleases you. It makes it harder for you to maybe even understand how to please them. So then you have two people who feel badly about themselves because they're not able to do the thing that they're biblically instructed to do, and they feel like a failure when in fact it's not a failing on their part. It's really about the harmful messaging that they've received.
That's something that I work with, is what are those messages and what message was introjected from the culture you were raised, from your caregivers, And I ask, what messages do you believe versus what messages you were taught to believe? And is there any difference? Do you have a different view of that? When I think of virginity, naturally it is PIV, which is penis in vagina intercourse. So the penis is entering the woman, and that determines whether she's a virgin or not. Plus, the importance of virginity for females and their ability to view themselves as pure versus the identity of males as virgins. Do they have male purity ceremonies?
Actually, I think they did. I think some of the Jonas Brothers were one of those famous people that kind of got into that way back. So yes, but certainly it's not under the same pressures. There is this, what's good for the goose is not good for the gander. Very much a part of that. So a woman's virtue is to keep her number low, her body count low, her number of sexual partners to an acceptably low number.
I could not believe, and again, with my kid, he said the word body count. I naturally went to murder. I said, what are you talking about? You have not murdered this number of people. It's like, Mom, yeah, no, Mom, this is not about killing people. This is about sex with other people. And so a male can say it's just atrocious to me. Their body count is 20. Yet if a female said their body count is 20, we have such societal hypocrisy. And that is the traditional label of slut.
That's
right. How
right.
is your label of slut different than if I pretend to have a body count of 20? Does that make me a slut? What makes me a slut?
What makes
I'm not saying that. I'm not talking about my body count. I'm just giving that example of how other people might use that term.
I think that's a great question. The word slut used in my book, Slut, Letting Go of Shame Around Sex and Sexuality, is to say that to be a slut is to feel empowered, to embrace yourself unapologetically, and to feel comfortable in your body as a sexual person. So that could mean that I have only had sex with my husband, and that is the only person I've ever had sex with, but I'm going to be his slut. So are you interested in trying that? Sure, honey, I'll try it. Maybe I like it, maybe I don't. But I'm open to having this sexual experience because I value, my own sexuality. And I feel that, when I am able to embrace my sexuality with my husband, we have a stronger relationship. So that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be lights off, missionary position with the Bible on the bed table. It can be a lot of different things.
It is empowerment of your sexual self. And that doesn't mean empowerment of my sexual self and sharing it with a handful of people.
No, there's no limit.
My personal peer group, we have a lot of fun with the word slut, and it has no shame linked with it. Like, what's going on that you're not being slutty? And we say this humorously, yet when I hear your definition, I would say I'm a slut. I feel good in my body, in my sexuality, would just say kind of in my sexual self. So I guess I'll go back to my girlfriends and say, I found out I'm a little slutty.
Because it starts in your mind. All sexual fantasies and behaviors start in your mind. So even if you're at a place where you're not ready to fully accept yourself, your mind is a place where you can begin. So if it seems too outrageous to declare that I enjoy these things or I want to do these things, let yourself think about it. Maybe that could be the first place of acceptance.
And that can be, again, with that straight intercourse sex. It's empowerment in your body while you're with the person that you love, respect, or have a base, hello, my name is. I just went to Slim Shady, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. This could be, there is 0 to 1,000,000 is the number of people you could have sex with or not and be a slut.
Because our society looks at that as so negative. Oh, that would be fun for me to say to my mom, I am a slut. She would look so sad in the face.
Yes, failed you.
Say, Tiffany,
I tried so hard. How could you say that?
let's say that, you're an adult, you're having consensual sex, yet you don't have that empowerment. How might they work on the empowerment of being sexual beings?
One, buy my book. It is a way to
Buy her book.
But in all seriousness, it does guide you through doing just that. And it starts very gently with the breath, because the breath is central to bringing ourselves back to our bodies. It's central to regulating our nervous systems. And if you are coming from a place where just the thought of this is anxiety producing or brings about feelings of shame, then just being comfortable with, I'm going to breathe and I have a right to exist, and I can feel at peace with that. That is a great place to start.
I also like developing self-compassion. Mm-hmm. So the kindness that we offer ourselves, and the biggest cheat of that is if my best friend or somebody I love said this statement or concern, how would I respond? And most of the time, you would have a caring friend. Not always. Some people are assholes. But you would have a caring friend. And so what statement would you say to them, and what interferes with you saying that to yourself? Because when I talk to my clients, I would say, well, are you being fake to your friend? And they would say, no. But if I said that to myself, that kind of feels fake. And I would want to explore, what about that feels fake? And bringing in the breath and bringing in that compassion of the words you say to yourself about yourself. And if we're looking at consensual sexual behaviors, if we're looking at it under the SSC of safe, sane, and consensual with adults, where is the problem?
There is no problem.
And but this is abnormal.
According to whom, how, and why? Where did that come from? What was the motivation? What were the biases that formed that practice, that cultural belief? And is that something I ascribe to today? So if you see yourself as property to be owned, traded, managed, that's going to be very different than if you see yourself as an autonomous being who has a right to exist.
In another one of your chapters, you mentioned the enemies of happiness, joy, and great sex. And I joked around that you and I are advocates of happiness, joy, and great sex. You briefly mentioned those enemies. Can you tell us about the more detailed piece of those enemies and how they're broken down? So we can talk about these relatively unhealthy and even unknown societal messages that we just integrate into our own beliefs. How do those become enemies?
Well, they become enemies because they tend to take on a life of their own. We don't oftentimes give consideration to generational trauma even, and how that impacts sex. So if I grew up in a sexually kind of repressive culture, and say my grandmother was sexually assaulted and she raised her child to never want to have that experience. And so maybe part of her learning was, well, you don't need to go out late at night. You don't need to be dressed like that. And you need to be very careful of who you assort yourself with.
Years ago, and I wish I knew the name of this movie, it was South American, I think Peruvian. And it was a grandmother that had experienced kind of a civil war dynamic. And the grandmother was in the time of war and the commonality of rape among the women of the villages. And she avoided rape by putting a potato in her vaginal canal. And in raising her granddaughter, she told her the atrocities that occurred and the need to put the potato inside of her. And do not go outside. Do not go outside at night. And the grandmother died in this movie and then went to live with her uncle because she was very dependent upon the grandmother. But at that time, she was still 20. But the grandmother had isolated her so much in her goal or attempts of protecting her. The 20-year-old was clueless. She goes and moves in with the uncle, and she starts having pelvic pain. And the uncle says, we have to go to the doctor. And she was so frightened because she also received anti-medical messages. It shows her high level of nervousness. She goes to the doctor. The doctor then discovers the potato that even had the roots or the fingers came out of her vaginal canal and was shocked about that. I just think that is an excellent example of the pain that occurs seemingly an intergenerational post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah. The grandmother thought she was protecting her child. She thought she was doing good, but was actually harming her. And so oftentimes the messages that we received are not delivered with malice. They are delivered with the intent of raising you the best of your parents' ability with the knowledge that they know. And that can be limited. It can be false and harmful. So given that your parents weren't trying to give you this trauma or anything like that, it's just what they knew. So you might have to look back and say, well, why did grandma tell you that? Is that really what you should be doing?
In the assessments that I have with my clients, I always ask what kind of sex education that they received. When I hear from clients, I didn't receive any at home. It was the basics that they provide in school, which we know is not medically accurate. I then say, so there was something uncomfortable or shameful about sex in your family of origin or from your caregivers. And I tend to receive a response that's a little bit surprising. I didn't realize that maybe their discomfort led to my discomfort.
Yes, exactly. And even in the house where we didn't talk about it, maybe I didn't get an overt message, but I certainly received implicit messages of.
Totally.
Yeah.
I also ask the menstruating people that I see, were they even informed about menstruation? And I am shocked that I have more of a handful of people that have said, no, I didn't know, or I didn't know at all, even in my peer group, or I wouldn't have known if my peer group didn't talk about it. The other common thing I will hear is the sex education I received was from school and porn. And we know that gives us a distorted view of what real sex is, that in porn, they're hired actors for their physical traits with their breasts and how their genitals look and how big their penis is. So if we have people learning about sex from porn and then start sharing their sexual bodies, their expectations are so skewed, it's almost like setting you up for disappointment.
Absolutely. And it's an illusion in a way. It's like, yes, people are actually having sex in porn, but they're doing it to arouse you. This isn't necessarily something they would be doing with themselves for their own pleasure. It's theatrical. So if you think that you need to perform like the stallions in porn,
Stallions.
Yeah. So that may be very unpleasant for the receiver of that kind of behavior, because that's not really connection in the ways that they need or want.
I say that as well, that it is acting and they have multiple breaks. They do the cut, pause, have lunch, take another Viagra, and it gives our penis owners a message of how their penis is supposed to look. Vulva owners, the message of what their vulva is. And again, I want to do the quote unquote, supposed to look. And so the judgment that we can have based upon our biological genitals can be completely skewed. So
Absolutely.
How can I be empowered in my sexual self if my penis is 4 inches and kind of skinny? If my vulva, the labia majora, so those are the small, thinner lips, let's make them a little longer. Let's make them a darker color than maybe the pink or the light cocoa. And let's make it more like, instead of light cocoa, let's make it dark chocolate. And then for those that have fair complected vulvas, let's make it purple, or even those can be darker brown. So how do I feel comfortable in my sexual body when I see these images that don't even reflect, and I'm using this as cisgendered, that don't reflect how my genitals are supposed to look? So that goes into what's wrong with me. Yeah. How do I empower myself when I don't look like the porn people?
Yeah. When you're talking about that, it just reminds me of that whole hullabaloo about the statue of David being viewed by children. And there's this
that's
idea.
awful. There's penises.
There's
in marble.
Delicate children can't.
You gotta put a leaf over that one.
Yes. And that is shame. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this pretty accurate, depiction of a human body. And that is the beginning of it. So if you don't see the variety of human bodies, if you don't have knowledge of human variety, then if you don't fit what you see in porn, then this is a problem to be fixed, rather than understanding that it's the conception that needs to be fixed, not your body.
I was interested in looking at some of the older erotic images, marble statues, that their penis seemed to be a little bit smaller than the images that we have today. And so I did some research on it. I don't have the numbers, but what I learned is back in more ancient times, even going up to medieval times, that smaller penises reflected more kind of self-control, purity, and larger penises were linked to heathens.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So if you have a big old cock, then you must be a heathen if you have a nice small one. And it's 100% different. It's 180 degrees different than the messages that we receive now. Maybe I should just tell my cisgendered men, see, you would have been very popular back then.
And Romanesque beauties today.
Yes. The beauty in the curves. We just don't recognize beauty in curve, beauty in the skin, the beauty that we can see just with that positive self-esteem, that's attractive, that you are, let's go for it, a slut in your body, that you're empowered in who you are as an erotic being. That is attractive.
Yes. And that is what's sexy. And once you shed yourself of what society tells you is sexy, then wow, aren't you in for a delight? Because there is a whole world of sexual expression, identity, bodies that are available to you. And it's solely limited by your own imagination and the edicts that you choose to hold.
What I noticed in the kink community as well as the swinging community, I don't know if you've noticed the same thing, but we will have, cisgendered women in lingerie. We will have women, walking around nude, depending upon what the activity is, or, if they're, swinging with another couple or in an orgy. There's such a variety of bodies. And when you don't have the experience of seeing this, we think of those people who are naked at a kink party or naked at a swinging party. Well, they must have this figure. To me, in observing, it is very empowering. I think you rock it. And it's the same thing with males, that when I have, seen them nude, having larger bellies, smaller penises, kind of man boobs, as we say. And I have the same view of it, is that you're rocking it. And again, without that experience, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know that that's actually the norm of our society, the norm of women's genes being 12 to 14 in the U.S. Now, I've also seen some bodies that are like porn quality.
Sure.
But limited amount.
That is the part of the variety. So I love that about the kink community, because you get to see that like any body is a sexy body. What makes you sexy is what's in your mind. So if you are someone who doesn't fit the idea of a model and you walk in like, all right, here it is, come and get it, that is sexy.
And it can be come and get it in a way that isn't about them sharing their body.
Doesn't have to be.
It can come and get it, like, check this out, in the sexual energy or the comfort in their body. And so many people aren't comfortable in their body with a spouse, let alone at an event. I talk to my clients and I say, I want you naked and I want you touching and I want at least a side light on. Yeah, I want to see that. I want you guys to play doctor. I want you to have a little bit of a exploration of the genitals, exploration of thighs and sides and necks and arms, and just how to feel free in the body when you're choosing, even in, again, a monogamous married relationship, that sexual empowerment.
Absolutely. It's when you dress up, are you dressing up for yourself or for the perception of you? So sexiness is I'm dressing because it makes me feel good. If I am noticed by no one, I feel good.
I like that. I had a client once that was working to kind of identify who the hell they were as a sexual being. And they got lingerie just for them. They were single, weren't sharing their body with anyone. And they said, I wore it while I was vacuuming. I said, yes.
That's right.
And
That's
some people that have told me that they felt really fake in it and they were just doing it for their partner's pleasure. I help them look at the negative messages that they had received that meant they're not sexy. So what about you isn't sexy? What about you is uncomfortable in that lingerie that isn't about identity? You know, if it's about that sense of identity, I can see that there might be some discomfort. But when they are these cisgendered women, we have societal expectations of them being in there, of, you know, the lingerie is built for the assigned female at birth. And so you're going to have the bra included. Well, unless there's the part that I love the lingeries that have it cut out. So your tits are really kind of out. That's a really great one too. It's a suggestion. That's just something I find sexy. You might not find that sexy at all.
Yeah, definitely. So that is the empowerment. That is the self-acceptance of being a slut.
So here she is in lingerie, vacuuming, wonderfully slutty.
Exactly. Maybe I just left the blinds slightly ajar.
And I live in a wooded area.
Yeah,
I just had a discussion recently about visual arousal and what kind of things arouse that person in looking at their partner. Was it more kind of lacy, stereotypical feminine? And they said, yes, nothing about leather. I just looked at my, nothing about leather.
Well, have they?
I think my bias just got in there. Yes. Because the person said, isn't that uncomfortable? And then the next thing they said is, if that empowers the woman, they would have more flexible thinking about whether they viewed it as sexy, because what they wanted is for that person to feel sexy in their own skin, and that was the turn on to them.
So they didn't need to buy the lingerie after all?
Well, we were discussing whether or not the female in this partnership would choose lace over the leather, even though the leather was really their thing. You had mentioned the stories that you received from other individuals. Is there any story that you would like to share with the listeners, just as one mere example? And that can be read from your book.
It's hard to choose just one.
I know, that's what I said. They're really good.
Yeah, there's some really good stories.
I was just wanting to get the listeners just one example of the wonderful ones. So this doesn't mean this is the be-all, end-all example or the number one example. It's just this is one of the stories that's shared in the book.
Well, it like I said, it's really hard to pick all the stories, but I guess of the stories that are different from the ones that are consistent to the book, actually is towards the chapter on ending legacies of shame. And in this story, I meet with someone who had the very opposite of shaming experience. They had parents who encouraged them to look at their bodies and to not be ashamed of sex, and encourage their children to come with questions, you know, knowing that they're not going to be judged. And so I think that that's actually probably the best story I could share, is that here's how you not perpetuate shame in your own life and in the people you care about. At the core of that is that nudity equals sexuality, and that's a part of the discomfort. So if you go to Europe, it's not very uncommon to see people on a beach that are topless. You could see advertisements of people topless. You can see, when I first went to Europe and I saw a mannequin with nipples, I didn't even consider that they should be there because our mannequins don't have them. That was
Barbie and Ken.
Yeah.
Neither of them have nipples when we all have nipples. No matter what body we're in, it's human.
It's universal. So just in that experience of seeing this new mannequin with a feature that I'm not comfortable with, was like, ooh, that was really salient. But if I had grown up with that, I wouldn't have noticed. And so the idea of nudity equals sexuality is part of that problem, because our naked bodies are not an issue. Our naked bodies aren't problematic. It is the conceptualization of them in sexual terms that is problematic.
My family, so that would be my ex-husband and son, we were at Orient Beach. And the beach next to, like, I think the main one, that was a family-friendly one. And if you just walk what would be like an unofficial block on the sand, then you're in the nude part of the beach. And what I said is, are you boys good? Because I would like to go over there for an hour. Mm-hmm. And I just normalized that. Mm-hmm. And now I look like a white swan. I was under the umbrella. I loaded up in sunblock. I wanted the free experience. My boys were like, all right, go over there.
Mom's weird.
And mom's weird. I hear that one a lot.
I remember my first time going to the Michigan Women's Music Festival just being such an eye-opening experience. I was very fortunate. I got to go when I was 18, and I went almost every year until it ended. And in that experience, I saw naked bodies of people who were born into female bodies, and they had a variety of just shapes, sizes, colors, and even hair distribution. That was the first time I saw a woman with a full beard, and it wasn't a problem to be fixed. It was a
full bush. And by the way, pubic hair, the influence is 100% porn.
Yeah.
70s
porn.
Full bush, completely bald. Are we, I think the word was landing strip.
Yeah.
And in your experience, I would assume that you had seen a variety of pubic hair.
Every variety. And it was amazing because it normalized my body. I didn't see myself as wrong or to be fixed. I was like, I fit in with this whole variety of humans. Wow, there's a variety of humans and they're all really beautiful in their own way. And it even had me confront fat phobia, because that had been ingrained in a part of my upbringing. And so to see larger bodies of people who weren't ashamed of those bodies was really informative for me.
I like the other statement that you said is that nude bodies are linked with sex. Mm-hmm. Versus here you are at the festival, mm-hmm. and we've got naked bodies that have to do with the freedom, mm-hmm. and not the sex. Now, there might be a few that were like, hey, let's get it on.
Sure.
If the majority.
But that wasn't the assumption.
But that's
my
the cultural experience.
My naked body is not an invitation to you. Is that?
Yeah, that's the whole thing about rape culture. I would be interested in having you on again because rape culture is so significant. And I hope that you would, choose to meet again on this podcast to discuss that more.
Absolutely.
And how can other people access your book?
Well, right now, the book is available on Amazon and wherever books are sold. So you can find them through independent local bookstores. Just go put in the name Slut Natasha Wilson. They will be able to find it.
Oh, how fun. That's linked with your name. Yeah. Do you provide anything online? Because you're in the Midwest. What about someone from Florida that wants to get a hold of you? How does someone link to you for coaching, for psychotherapy, to receive trainings that you provide?
Yeah, great. My website is whatisaslut.com. And whatisaslut.com is the way to get in touch with me. I have periodically been starting to put up some blogs and information. And certainly there's a contact for me if you'd like to schedule classes, teachings, group consultations.
All right. What is a slut?
Whatisaslut.com.
Whatisaslut.com. I want you to check it out. If these are challenges that you have in your life, the book can really help you, with the self-help part of it, of creating a sense of self that is based on your beliefs. So thank you so much for joining us today, Natasha.
Thank you for the opportunity.
The music for Tiffany Turned On is provided by Kumasi Afrobeat. You can find them online at KUMASIAFROBEAT.com. They are New Orleans' full Afrobeat band. They play to make you move. If you enjoyed today's episode, click follow, like, give me a review. Did you know that books or items that I recommend in the podcast can be found on my website? Check me out. Watch my TEDx talk titled I Love Pleasure. It is all at neworleanssextherapy.com. Get turned on to life and in your bedroom.